Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Happy to be here. Welcome to this special episode of Beyond the Blocks with me, Raven. I am very happy to jump in here, and I had a chat with, and welcome first. Let's welcome James to the show. Hey, James.
Hey, hey, how's it going, everybody?
How's it
Nice
going?
to talk to you.
And was chatting with James last night and wanted to jump on here. James obviously has a art block security project going on right now called Busy, which is for sale, and the auction is ongoing. So encourage you to check that out, and we're going to talk about that today. This is a project that I got to see in person in Marfa this year, and was super excited about to see the scale of it being plotted on this huge table. I told James at the time I never have seen a plotter this big, so we're gonna have to talk a little bit about that. And you even were going back and forth in and out of the art blocks house, like making sure that the plot was working. So um, first off, welcome to the show, James, and it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. Super exciting to be here. Glad you're able to come out in Marfa and check out the Busy in Marfa part of this and see what has happened since then, because a lot has changed and we can talk about it. But I actually got access to a plotter that was like it's like double the size of the one that I had in Texas. Like you can see in my background, that's kind of the scale that I typically operate on. And for Busy, we had a prototype pen plotter built that was twice the size. Like it was crazy. So you can kind of get into that a little bit too.
That's great. I love to start out with just talking about how you got into plotters and maybe just talk about generative art in general. Let's start with when did you start doing generative art? Like what got you interested in that, and when did you start actually doing generative art?
Yeah, so I basically those things happened at the same exact time. But prior to that, I had been doing digital art. Really, it's been almost 20 years now. And I was really into just creating digital art, posting it online, a lot of abstract work, a lot of group exhibitions, and spent many years focused on that. And whenever I saw generative art, I actually didn't like it that much. I didn't see anything that was that inspiring because I really wanted like absolute control over every pixel, and I wanted to be able to paint and illustrate every single little thing. And then in 2019, I was just basically browsing Hacker News, and someone pointed out in a comment or an article that there was this little community on Twitter called Plotter Twitter. And once I saw that, my mind was kind of blown. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I ended up ordering an AxiDraw from Evil Mad Scientist, which is a pen plotter that plots at 11 by 17, and getting it shipped to my house. And I was basically like, this is such a frivolous purchase. I'm going to make this machine pay for itself. So I'm going to set up like an Etsy account and I'm going to sell drawings for like $135 a piece. And I'm going to teach myself how to code art. Like, I feel like I was a creative coder in my professional life, but to make art with code was something I never really attempted. And I feel like on a screen, like I could just, open up Photoshop or 3 Studio Max and make something that I liked, but I couldn't do that and get it on paper. So that was like kind of where the necessity of programming occurred. And having a background in JavaScript, it was like kind of a great fit. So I actually challenged myself to drop all of like my preconceived notions about how to program and started a baseline generatively. So I started with processing. I was able to figure out how to like make basic things occur and send them to the pen plotter, and that was kind of how it all started.
That's great. And no, it's awesome how you said that plotter was actually like when you first um got into generative art, you like from the beginning you were thinking of plotters and actually using um machine instead of just it being all digital. What drew you to kind of maybe that analog side of it? Have you ever thought of that of you know like instead of just going into the digital and being fine with that, but actually printing your work and in this case plotting your work? What drew you to that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of magical things about pen plotting that are almost impossible to replicate with any other artistic practice. So, for me, I do like to draw and paint and that sort of thing, but I never really found myself wanting to do committing to 100 hours to draw something in pen or paint. So for me, that was like the huge unlock is that I could make traditional art, but I could use my mind as opposed to necessarily my hand. The machine will kind of take over that part of the process and do it methodically and fairly perfectly. There is some slippage that occurs whenever you're using physical media. There are things that pop up that you might not expect, and I kind of love that aspect of it in a sense. And it's still typically way more refined than I would be able to do. So a lot of the artwork I create digitally that gets drawn by the pen plotter, I could never see myself or most people being able to actually do that with a pen on paper. And to me, that is like a hugely exciting domain to work in.
That's great. Yeah. And I think this is a good time. We can jump into your latest project because it is very much about pen plotting. I would love to I'm just going to show some of this. I know, James, you can't really see what I'm doing right here, but I'm just going to be showing your, some of the outputs from the collection. Um, and maybe we could just talk about it as we're looking here. Um, what, I guess, what made you think of this exact like composition? When we're looking at Busy, it's obviously, if you zoom in, there's a lot of different, I see kind of, factory elements, houses, in some cases, buildings, all these different little intricate details, in these compositions. What made you come up with this concept?
Yeah, I think I wanted to create a feeling. I wanted to make something that took you to a place mentally that I was trying to build a world around, and that to me is kind of this idea of chaos at scale and the lack of context making you believe it's chaos. So imagine yourself in the middle of a city and everyone's going about their day. There's vehicles, there's people, there's noise. All that can feel very chaotic. And for me, it was very anxiety inducing when I was in that situation at first. And then as I got a little more used to it, I realized that with the context of the place, with the understanding that these were actually all systems that were layered on top of one another, whether it be a transit system, a work day, all these different things, that actually there was a lot of order. Everything kind of happens on a set schedule. And that was a great realization that reduced a lot of my anxiety being, a person who lives in Vermont and currently, is visiting New York on a regular basis for art related events. That was a big moment for me. So it's almost an expression of that transition in my life. It, I think to me, I wanted to create artwork that gave you the sense that there was so much happening. It was kind of chaotic. You don't understand what it is. You may see one thing when you look at it in the first 10 seconds, but then when you sit with it for a couple of minutes, you realize that there's all these underlying systems. And that's really what I wanted to convey, and the compositions arose from that.
Yeah. That's amazing. And looking at, you can totally see that. And I love how you said, how you said that, showing a hidden order through what seems like chaos. And I think that that is really a cool, it just made me think immediately and really I was like, resonated with me definitely because I think what you said, like, just the world can create a lot of anxiety, right? Especially with what's going on the last week, right? So, kind of find order when there's a lot of chaos going on, is something that is I think we all hope for. So I think it's really cool that in this piece you kind of um you're representing that in a way, and I can totally see that. It seems so chaotic, but then as you're diving into these outputs, um you do see the order in it. And also I love how we'll try to show how it's happens now, but I love how you um the generation on the live view, which we're seeing on the screen now. Can you talk to us a little about that? Because this like it's just really cool. Like like the little loading screen, but then the way it just kind of explodes out and then it kind of like explodes back in and then kind of fills in the details more. Can you explain like a little maybe technically of like what's going on there and like how did you think of actually like showing that kind of animation logic?
Yeah, so what you're seeing is basically like it's computing a lot of different things at one time. So there's a lot of kind of steps that you're not seeing, but you're arriving at basically this set of geometry that is ready to plot. You can't right click and plot this necessarily, but it's doing all the same calculations that would deliver that kind of plotted specific output of SVG. And one of the big things with that is having occlusion so that the buildings have kind of depth and dimension and they sit on top and behind other elements. And in order to do that, you could do everything in one foul swoop. And with programming, you kind of sometimes you want to do that. You want to do a large calculation at once, but it's not always necessarily the best user experience to have things just like hang for 10 seconds. Instead, it's better to trickle them out. So to kind of can do it in 10 segments and iterate as opposed to like, I'm going to do it all right this very second, because you'll be able to get visual feedback a lot faster. So it's actually not really a creative choice to do it that way. It's more of a technical choice. And if you look at Ori and actually a lot of projects in general do this, like they
Yeah.
build, they don't just kind of appear. It's hard to make things just appear. So, I kind of had that happening and it wasn't very interesting. And then a simple trick of just figuring out like the distance of all the things related to the center of the canvas and then using that as a sorting mechanism. So things kind of are sorted by their distance. And well, then as you iteratively draw them, they'll start from the center and move outward. And if you reverse that sort, it'll do the opposite. So it builds in 3 steps. So first it's the pipes. Then it's what I call the landmarks, which are like 100 different illustrations that I've drawn that get kind of slurped up by the generative algorithm and inserted into the artwork. And then there's these things, for lack of a better term, I just call them micro units, but they're basically like little tiny elements that just can appear in like 1 or 2 areas of the grid. So they're not very big and they just fill in all the gaps. So there's like a lot of computation to fill this grid. And then whenever that doesn't quite fill all the way, I just insert all these little tiny elements to give you that depth. And that's kind of like that third phase that you see build at the very end.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I love how you say, this wasn't like an artistic choice, but it almost becomes an artistic choice. It becomes a really cool part of it, I think, of seeing exactly how it's a bit of seeing how the bread is made, right? You're seeing it being composed and kind of and calculated in real time and laid out, which is really cool. And I think like that's probably something in a lot of art blocks projects. There's some really cool, loading logic or the way they're kind of, displayed, especially for static pieces like this, that kind of gets lost a lot of times because, people are just looking at the saved, you know, uh, output or, that flat file, right? At the end that gets produced. But there's a lot of art blocks projects that have some pretty cool, animation to get to that point, right? So that's something that people definitely should check out on the live view. Just wanted to while we're on this page, just check in. It looks like we got an hour and 42 minutes left in the auction of these 50 pieces. The floor right now, as far as the minimum bid, is 0.21. So just wanted to highlight that there's still time to get one of these pieces. It's got an hour and 42 minutes left on the bidding on artblocks.io. And again, this is for anybody who doesn't know, these are just samples that we're showing. This is obviously a generative collection. So what will happen is that once the winners of this bidding happen, these will all be generated live. So uh, these are all just sample outputs from the algorithm. However, the 50 will be generated. And I think the magic of generative art, especially long form generative art, which, on art blocks has really pioneered, is, the fact that James doesn't know what the final outputs are going to be. I don't know what the final outputs are going to be. No one does. Only the blockchain gods do at this moment, which is amazing. And I think it's something that's really has historically generative art hasn't really been this way for the most part. And I think it's something that is really cool. Like it's just it's scary for us artists for sure, but it's really fun to have it be completely emergent like that. Don't you agree?
I do. I actually, couple things. So, it's not only that we're not going to know what these are and they're going to get generated, and that's going to be a surprise, but I'm going to draw all 50 of
Yeah,
these, and you'll be able to claim the drawing complimentary. So if you own the NFT and 24 hours after the auction ends, the claim window opens. Then you can go in there. If you own the NFT, you can enter your shipping address, that sort of thing, and you'll get the drawing delivered to your door, no extra charge.
that's awesome.
And I want to mention, like, back when generative art and digital art was really, really new, this is actually kind of how it worked. So you would write a rudimentary program, sometimes on a punch card, and you would take it to a mainframe, it would process that, and then it would output whatever the results of the program were on a pen plotter, and you would look at that. So your flow was like really, really hard to do programming, and then pen plotter. And you didn't know what you were going to get. You didn't know if the program would actually have an error or not. But that was like the beginning and the end of that process. And that's effectively kind of what we're doing today, where I've written the program. I don't know what it's going to do, but I have to plot it with the pen plotter to figure that out in a sense.
Cool. I got some questions coming in. One of them was around the color palette choices. Do they have any meaning for you? Like, how did you come up with the color palette for this project?
Yeah, so the color palettes are dictated by what's available in terms of archival quality ink. So there's a lot of really interesting inks out there, and a lot of them will fade if they're exposed to UV light, dye-based inks. So, for Busy, it was really important to me to make something that will last many decades, that hopefully someday will end up in a gallery or museum. And because of that, I was very specific about the colors that I opted to use, and trying to work with this reduced palette in a way that I could make multiple different color palettes that evoke different senses, have different brightnesses, that sort of thing. That's where they all kind of were derived from. But the really interesting thing is, even if there's two outputs that are the same color palette, the balance of colors could be shifted quite a lot. So you'll find some might have a cooler tone or a warmer tone. And there's definitely a lot of room for chance in terms of what we're going to get. And there's one color palette that's just called the Mega Palette, and it uses so many different colored inks. I think it uses 12 different colors. And
Wow.
that's the rarest, because that's going to take me literally running the plot 12 times, like the plotter 12 times with 12 different pens with 12 different colors to actually create. And they look like radically different from like output to output, because there's so much chance in there of like what's going to actually become prominent. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, like that was my next question, is that, immediately I was thinking, cuz I've done different plotter projects. I did shields with plottables, and the one thing I know about this stuff is that, changing ink changing pens, and ink colors is not like that easy, right? It's it can go bad. So, and you also have to be there to remember. I mean, these plots take like how long are these plots going to take each? If you could tell, if you could,
I think
I
like
think give people
10,
perspective, right?
10 to 15 hours a piece.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to make all 50, regardless of whether they're claimed or not. Anyone who buys an NFT on secondary, it's unclaimed. They can claim it at any time in the future. and I'll have that plot done in the flat file behind me ready to ship. So it's going to take a while. Switching the inks is very difficult. I've spent almost a year on this, and at one point, I was very focused on the production side of things and how to ensure that I'm able to do these multicolor plots and have them turn out okay every single time, as opposed to what would happen in the past with my art, which is when I did multiple inks, I had to be really exact about how I put the pen back in the plotter, and if it was off, then the alignment would be inaccurate, and then the whole plot was kind of ruined. And Busy is like literally the hardest project to execute on for this, because every single like pipe and tube is basically composed of like 5 or 6 different colored inks,
Yeah.
all with super tight registration. So if anyone is
Oof.
off, it's immediately obvious. Like it's basically me just challenging myself and spiting myself to do it this way. So I basically was like, this needs to be the way it's going to happen. I'll devise a solution. So I got into 3D printing and designed parts that allow me to basically do this in a way
Wow.
where I can always get it accurately. And that was a long process to figure out.
Amazing. And you also have some the plotter you're using, right? Can you describe about that the company behind that? And it's a newer version of of that plotter, right?
Yeah, so there's multiple plotters in the mix at this point. There's about to be more. So I guess I'll start with the one behind me is an AxiDraw A1, which is made by Evil Mad Scientist. I bought that at the beginning of 2024. They'd been acquired later that year by Bantam Tools, and they moved the company from Sunnyvale, California, out to Peekskill, New York. And the people who ended up acquiring them are like the best. Like literally, they threw a big party. They supplied all the technology for the Harold Cohen exhibition at the Whitney. They're Bantam Tools. And if you go to their offices, it is like a plotter art museum. It's
Wow.
insane. And they're just committed to basically building machines that allow plotter artists to make museum quality artwork. Like that is their stated goal. And I could not be more excited about it. And for Busy, at the very last minute, we kind of had this dream like, how big can we make this thing? And I went to them with a proposal, and they ended up building a prototype pen plotter, which you can't see now. But it basically doubles the size of that one. So it could do
Yeah.
72 by 24, and amazing cinematic size. And there's really nothing else out in the world like that except for this one machine. And I fortunately was able to use it for like a week and a half and was able to do 5 busiest drawings, which went up to auction and sold out in 8 minutes 2 days ago now. And those are like crazy. I mean, they're basically like they're what I've always wanted to make. Like since the first time I'd ever seen a pen plotter, that's what I wanted to do, and I was able to finally execute on it with their help, and it's like the best feeling in the world.
That's amazing. Yeah. I saw that. I think I saw that one in Marfa. That was the one you're using there.
That's a little different. That's like their newer version of the AxiDraw called
Okay,
the
so
Next
there's an even
Draw, which
bigger
has a bunch
version
of
than that
mechanical
that I didn't
improvements.
see. Wow, that one was
Yeah.
huge. It's crazy this technology and how good it's getting. It's amazing, and I so like you said, it's really hard to actually have a pen execute with these tight tolerances like this, and then having multiple, um, colors on top of it. This is really like a as far as technicality of execution, like you said, on a plotter, this is like, really, really high up there of like difficulty, right? So it's really amazing that you've made something that's not only, looks great, and I think it's also on the execution side, you have a really achievement here as well, which is to be celebrated. We got a few minutes left. One other question was, you know, are these like are these kind of cities inspired by any type of city in particular? Um, and if so, do you plan on doing other versions of this that maybe or incorporate other cities?
Yeah, so I had to think about this one a lot because I didn't want to just like put the Eiffel Tower in the middle of the artwork. That didn't feel authentic to me. It's basically an imaginary world that I've built and illustrated over the course of the last year, that's inspired by cities, absolutely. but has no specific landmarks from any known city. It's just being creative, having fun with it, and seeing where it can get. But I spent a lot of time in Baltimore when I was younger, and spent a couple years living in the city. So there's an aspect of that. There's an aspect of New York. There's an aspect of just like worldwide cities. But the really interesting thing for me is this is more now a framework than a single artwork. And as you saw in Marfa in Texas, I have the ability to like take that framework and adapt it to locations. And I'm calling this hyperlocal artwork or generative art, where I can make generative art on location in specific places that has some sort of element of the place like imbued within it. So I could do that in a high desert, I could do that in a big city. And there's a lot of conversations occurring right now, like where this is going to happen next. And without saying too much, I can say it's going to be really, really interesting where this happens. A couple months, hopefully. It's going to be around the world. And
Awesome.
basically, I'll take this framework, remove a lot of what I've done, and then incorporate that specific location, and then go there with a pen plotter and create the artwork there. And the other thing I did in Marfa is I burned all the artwork after I left, so that you had to be there to see it. I don't know if I'll do that again. We'll have to see.
Well, I'm glad I saw it. So it's very dramatic. Going for the performance art at the end of it, I say.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Burning Man.
That's amazing. Well, James, it's been so great. We're getting to the end here. It's been, amazing chatting with you. I always enjoy, chatting with you about art, about everything. That every time I see you, we always have great conversations. So thanks again for joining. I know people are really digging this project and digging a lot of the other projects that you've done, and appreciate you coming on and chatting about it.
I really appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure, and just want to say thank you to Art Blocks and the collectors of Busiest, and everyone who's bidding on Busy right now. So many bees. But yeah, it's a thrilling experience, and I'm here to chat more. Hopefully, we'll run into each other again soon. I'll see you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Talk
See
to you
ya.
soon.